Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today it is a revisit for someone who we last brought onto the show maybe 4 years ago. Tobias, it's very good to see you.
Good to be here.
So listen, lovely to have you on the show. As we said, we were trying to work out whether it was late 2000 or early 2001 that we last had you.
2021, I think.
It was. There you go. I'll take that as well. So that was back in the Moorgate Benchmarks days. You're now with a new startup, PANTA. There's a lot of water that's passed over that sort of time, some very, very cool stuff to go into. And I'm really looking forward to this show. I loved us talking last time. We kept in touch all the way through. And now we've got something very exciting to be talking about as well. So let's go back to the start. Give us a little bit of background to yourself and then tell us what you're doing with PANTA.
Yeah, so I'm a banker by trade. So I'm a late starter into the world of startups. Took me 20 years in the corporate world to find out that the corporate world isn't for me.
20 great years.
So absolutely 20 great years. So when we last met, we were just in the middle of building a company called Moorgate Benchmarks, which was a mix between a consulting and a software as a service company, where we helped index providers in index design, index administration, and also in the calculation of indices as a white label calculation service. I think you're right. I think it was January, February 2021, right in the middle of COVID.
Lockdown 2, wasn't it? At that
it
stage?
Was lockdown 2. We did a fundraising in lockdown, which brings its own challenges. Probably something for its own episode. And that fundraising, I mean, it was a Series A+ fundraising. That fundraising then eventually led into us selling the company to Morningstar. We didn't really want to sell at that stage. As you said, was super early. We were still building, but we realized it was a match. It was a match from a vision point of view. So they had the same vision that we had, and we brought a lot of things that they didn't have, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah,
testament to the company at that sort of stage.
Absolutely.
So when you can get to that sell earlier than you perhaps envision, you're doing something right.
Yeah, and so we decided to sell the company in September 2021.
And that was, as we said before we came on air, that's a good, not a bad time.
Absolutely. I wish I could be sitting here and saying I managed to hit the peak of the valuations, but in hindsight, that's what it was.
And so exited there, physically a couple of years ago now. Mm-hmm. Tell us about this sort of journey since then.
So I stayed on for 18 months because the company was so young. We as the founders really felt we should really pass on the baby properly, if that is the right term. So that's what we did. Quite challenging part of the journey. You would think that building a company and exiting is the difficult part, but sometimes the post-exit part was more challenging. We did successfully. We successfully realized all synergies that we wanted to realize. In parallel, I did a lot of startup investing. Again, I already did that before I started Moorgate Benchmarks, so quite an interesting period as well. Exactly.
We'll come on to that.
Was super interesting, really helping a lot of startups, really bringing my expertise in terms of commercial aspects and in terms of productizing some cool technology. But then we came together, a couple of people that I worked with earlier, and we said the index industry is still ripe for disruption. And that's where PANTA was born.
And so talk to me a little bit about what ripe for disruption looks like and what that birth was all about.
Exactly. It wasn't a painful birth, but the index industry is an interesting little industry. Well, it's not so little anymore. Right? It was little when it started to evolve in the 70s, in the late 70s, from a very exotic idea of really having stock market ETFs and really having an easy access to equity markets to today, where where it's a 25 trillion US dollar industry. It's an industry which...
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is absolutely amazing, right? But it's an index industry which is growing massively. We've seen massive flows from active into passive.
And what's prompted that?
Well, it's basically it's a very cheap and very efficient and fast way to get wide access to equity markets, right? And if you look at the studies, S&P does a study every year, the famous SPIVA scorecard, famous for index geeks, that is. Then, well, indices are outperforming, depending on what asset class you look at, up to 80 to 90% of the active managers, right? So in order to get access to plain vanilla asset classes and plain vanilla strategies, indices and ETFs on the back of them are the tool of choice. So that's the main driver which prompted that massive growth of the indexing industry. There's another driver which is customization. When I speak to my 21-year-old son who is interested in investing, he says that I can customize everything on my iPhone. Investing, not so much, right? Or either I have enough money and then I can go and pay an advisor to really get me a portfolio together, but there's no technology solution out there, right? And
it's amazing that, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the FT famously quoted me once, like, investing should be like swiping left and swiping right. And I think that's what it is, right? You want to get access to a certain portfolio quick, right, by swiping left and saying I want to have exposure to North American equity, swiping right, I don't want to have Tesla on there, and so on and so forth, and then bam, you have your portfolio. I'm obviously simplifying, but that's basically what our kids' generations wants to go. So you have that massive need for customization and personalization. But on the other hand, you have an industry which is still stuck in the 90s, right? Apologies for the viewers who are in the index industry, but that's what it is. I mean, the industry is simply not set up in order to provide flexible, fast solutions. And that's where we come in, right? So we want to build, or we are building, the operating system of the index industry. And we do build two pieces of technology. One is called the PANTA Lab, which is essentially a design front end where asset managers and asset owners can go in and model their indices, which then can be underlying for ETFs or other structured products. Do the back testing and really get that index to the point where it can be is ready to be calculated. The second piece of technology is what we call the index engine, the PANTA engine, which is the back end which does very scalable, very flexible index calculation and then distributes it out to the world. So that's what we're doing because we believe that the index industry is changing from a point where index providers did everything in-house, right? Because operations and technology used to be a competing edge for index providers, to a world where they realize, well, it's not, right, and it's so standardized, and we can use technology out of the box, which PANTA offers.
So I love the whole thought concept around that, and actually just sort of that, going back to that piece about next generation coming through, expecting things digitally that just aren't happening in the financial services industry. And as you say, look, there's something that's sat there technically 20, 30, 40 years out of date. The ability to come in there and do that. Tell me a little bit about how the adoption is, because once you can say that, and it makes absolute sense, there is still this conservative nature about saying, well, look, we stay here and we play with the same sort of thing, and it's a conservative space to be in sometimes. It's a risk-free, it's the ultimate sort of paradox, isn't it? You've got a very risk-friendly business in financial services, but also a very risk-averse business in other areas. And when it comes to investing in tech, you see this huge, great opportunity that's sort of sat there, but still there's a reticence to jump on board, which happens far quicker in other areas. So you've come in to revolutionise a space. You've come in there with something there that makes absolute sense when you talk about it, as you just have. I imagine that there's still some people that need some persuading within that story.
100%, right? And it feels like it's two worlds, right? If I speak to my son and if I speak to people in the index industry, it's completely different challenges, completely different thinking, right? I mean, and I've been part of that index industry for the last 20 years. So you could argue I'm part of the problem, right? But you're absolutely spot on. It's an industry which says, oh, well, we've been using that index for so long. Why should we change? Why should we outsource the technology to someone else? We can do that ourselves, and so on and so forth. And it's completely different challenges from what the end consumer was. My son doesn't give a, excuse my French, damn about what the ETF provider is that is behind the offering. He doesn't really care what the index provider is behind the offering. He basically trusts Apple, or in his case Google, to really provide the operating system. Everything behind, he just expects that it works, right? So there's this massive clash of the consumer with that very established industry where you have completely different challenges. So yes, it needs a lot of explaining. Yes, it's a completely different approach. But we've had the same thing with mortgage benchmarks, right? Where we kind of operated horizontally in a vertical industry, which was thinking vertically, and we do the same thing now, right? So it almost feels like we're bringing in a completely new layer, and that needs explaining, and that needs convincing, absolutely. But that's the fun part.
And talk to me about how that's going. So you're just over a year into the whole journey now?
It's going pretty well. So the technology is ready. So we are at MVP stage. We are about to onboard our first customer. So that's going to be next news, which we're going to roll out. We're getting really good traction. So we're selling our technology mainly to asset managers on the front end side. So asset managers who really, as I said earlier, do all their index design needs on our platform, as opposed to what they do until today, which is sending Excel sheets back and forth, so they can do it on their platform, on our platform. So we have a number of big global asset managers who are about to trial our technology. So we get really good traction there. And the second part is for the engine, where we're focusing on everyone who needs to do index calculation at scale, and wants to use our technology. We don't really get involved in operations, so we really are pure tech provider where we provide the front end and the back end.
So it must be great fun.
It is, definitely.
So, and you've sat there as well, and this is, as we say, it's not the first rodeo for you. You've also been involved in a lot of other startups and investments, so this interesting sort of investor / entrepreneur at the same sort of time gives you a fantastic view of what works, what doesn't work, what it goes through. You've had a successful part from it. What are you putting into everything that you've learned so far to make sure that this one, exceeds everything you've done so far?
And this won't come to you as a surprise. I'm pretty sure you heard it quite often. For me, it's two things which I focus on. It's team and focus, right? Getting the right team together.
And that works both as an entrepreneur and an investor.
100%, right? At PANTA, we were very fortunate to really have a team together, which feels like crosses the bridge between technology and industry skills. What I very often see, and that's not only the case in the index industry, is that you have either or. You have brilliant techies, or you have brilliant industry experts, right? Merging the two together almost feels super difficult, right? I mean, I know you guys are doing a great job in doing that, right? But I see a lot of companies where this is really either or. So we were very fortunate that we were able to do that. And I've been doing that with a couple of startups which I invested in, sitting on the board or as an advisor in the first stage, really helping the typical setup, great technology guys, but have no idea about how you productize, how you strike relationships, how you do partnerships, and how you sell a product. So I went into a couple of those and really helped them, and also helped them building the structures which they need in order to scale.
It's very interesting you say that, because one of my hobbies over the last few episodes, or few hundred episodes of doing his show, has been thinking about the sort of origin story of the founder. And you're right, you're looking at it and you're saying, right, what's the background, how does it work? You see some very evangelical technology people talking about their products and their, how it comes from a very tech-orientated place, and quite often that sort of lacks the sort of finesse of how does it actually work, and what sort of business problem does it solve. Conversely, you see people coming from a business background who aren't necessarily as product ready as they could be, maybe oversell a little bit, and go down the other side of it, or a sales background that come into it. But I'm really interested at the moment about these product-led founders who maybe come from a product management background, gone in to see things, are very good at thinking about the problem that they're solving, making sure it's a problem that actually needs to be solved in the industry, and then go about collecting the right people to be able to do that. Is that something I mean, from what you've been speaking about and what we were going through there, it feels like you're actually solving a problem that needs to be solved, and you've really come at it from a product-based background.
100%. And by the way, that's also something which I saw changing over the last 3 years in the whole investment landscape. Right? When we were out there raising funds in 2021, the discussion was always, are you sexy enough? Why do you want to be profitable? And really, why don't you need more, right? You only need 5 million. We can give you 10. Can you build it in half the time, right? Where we said no. We have a clear focus. We're solving a problem. We have a clear
which not everyone did at that time as well.
Path to profitability. And I remember having a lot of VCs sitting across the table or across the Zoom call, and really saying, well, it's not sexy enough, it's not, we don't really want to see profitability. That has changed obviously completely over the last 3-4 years.
Where for the better,
absolutely, probably for the better, much for the better, right? Because what investors are looking at is, from a product perspective, are you solving a problem which exists, right? Or are you solving a problem which still has to be invented? Do the founders know what they do? Are they from the industry? Have they done it before? And do they have profitability in focus? And I think that these are good things, right? And thankfully we tick all these boxes, right? So it's interesting how the whole investing landscape has changed in that respect in the last couple of years.
Apart from arguably in the AI space, and this is something which I know you speak about as well. So when we talk about bubbles, and I know there's still a lot going into AI projects in various different phases, and it feels like VCs are, in particular, are keen not to be left behind on getting the next big AI project through. This is something, as we spoke about off camera beforehand, that you started investing in 2016. Your wife told you off for being too much of a geek around it at dinner parties, etc., which I love. So tell me how that sort of comes in. Are you seeing any sort of difference in that side of the story? Because it's a danger. There's a bubble danger when people start to go into that and try and catch up.
Yeah, I mean, look, from a high level perspective, every innovation that we've seen over the last couple of 100 years, which is groundbreaking, was eventually developing a bubble, right? So if you think of the last bubble that we had, the internet bubble in the early 2000s, same thing, right? I think it's just a very natural cycle that you see a bubble, and AI is no different, right? I think it's on a very similar level to the internet bubble, right? And I see a lot of similarities. I've lived through the internet bubble as an investor, very painful.
And as a recruiter, I can tell you that.
I can imagine, right? And I see such a lot of similarities. But I think it's, at the end of the day, it will be a painful process when the bubble bursts. But the companies that will survive will be the companies which will change the way we live and work, like we've seen in the internet bubble, right? I mean, who are the companies that survived? It's the Apples, it's the Amazons of these worlds who really changed the way we live and work.
Yeah, I think that's an important part to add on that. And I think there's definitely also lessons. I mean, if we go back to and reminisce back to the 2002 times. I remember going to client meetings and when was it? 2001, 2000? No, yeah, 2001, 2002 was the dot-com burst. And you go back to client meetings and you see what they were spending their money on at that sort of stage, like lawns being sprinkled in the middle of an office and things like that. That money wasn't being intelligently spent at that sort of stage. It was trinkets and office slides and all that sort of stuff. It was very, it felt to me very sort of, people were throwing it around like confetti at that sort of stage. This time out, whilst investment's coming in, it feels like there's a more mature way of dealing with it. So even if there is a bubble, I think there'll be companies there. Obviously, there's going to be companies that suffer. Just as there was in 2021 and 2022 with some of the investment that came into all over the tech space, full stop. But then it was about over-egging and over-betting and over-investing on staff, as opposed to some of the frivolous stuff we were saying beforehand. You say that's fair?
No, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm seeing. Right? Thank God, people our generation are still around who lived through the last bubble, right? Who basically learned the lessons in a very painful way. So that doesn't really happen at that level. Absolutely, same thing.
So let's go back to that. So this investment piece at the moment, you're there and you're splitting your time between building up something great in a space there that needs to be revolutionised, changing the way people are thinking about some stuff in a pretty traditional space, and then investing at the same sort of time. And you mentioned a number of 50 different investments you've made over the last few years. So that has to have some discipline around it by the same sort of same rationale. So when you're looking at making an investment, tell me a little bit about, I mean, you sort of led us up to this already about sort of focus and team. But is that what makes you make the difference?
Yeah,
what is it that's
I mean, I'm investing in pre-seed and seed stages, so it's really about the team, right? And
how do they come to you? Is this through angel groups?
It's really a wide network. So I started in AI in 16, 17, back when my wife said I'm a bit too geeky at dinner parties, running around telling everyone it's going to change the world. Back then it was really something which I stumbled in by coincidence, right? I had actually a common acquaintance who dragged me into that and said, well, we have this AI meetup, don't you want to come along? And I said, well, I heard about this AI thing, this is interesting.
It's Bernie, is it?
No, it's actually Brandon.
Okay.
So
okay, that makes sense now.
and he brought me into that circle, right? And you learn to know people. You get into the syndicates and the networks, and it was very interesting because it was a technology I didn't really have a clue about. So I met.
And that's how you got yourself into it. You started,
Exactly right. And you meet founders and really they tell you about how they use AI in, I don't know, controlling salmon farming or in other agricultural areas. So that's how I got into it, right? And then you build a network. So I started there. So half of my portfolio are AI companies, which I invested in 2016 to 2018, and then I went back after the exit. And focusing on FinTech and climate tech. FinTech, obviously, is something which I have been in for quite a while, so very wide network there. Climate tech, again, were piggybacked on other people who were
I think that climate tech space is a very interesting sort of area to sort of, and actually, if you think about even the ESG angle of FinTech and how it moved onto there, it's all quite tied in together.
Absolutely, and that's my sweet spot. So because I'm a FinTech guy, so companies who are in the climate tech space, but also are in the financial space are really my sweet spot. So think of companies. One of the companies I invested in is they do insurance for voluntary carbon credit projects, right? So you can invest in a carbon credit project, and it insures the whole value chain, things like that. So that's my sweet spot. Yeah, I think in general, climate tech is. I mean, I decided to put my money where my mouth is, but it's also a great opportunity because I think technology will really solve that problem. I think governments, lawmakers and big corporates can only do so much. I think there's technology innovation which needs to solve most of it.
So looking at those companies and now having a sort of 10-year, 20-year portfolio of businesses and seeing what's good and what makes companies work, there must be so many great lessons that you can take into your own business on that. But if you were to sort of like try and summarize, and this is a big question, but if you were to summarize some of the things that you think are the ingredients to making that success, and obviously getting a great team and having the focus there, but practical things that people are doing to ensure their companies are really thriving, what are some of those things that sort of come in there?
It almost comes back to getting the right people with the right mindset, and I'm not saying that because I'm talking to you, but that's so crucial, right? And we talked about that weird situation in the industry where the customer almost thinks completely different than our industry. Yeah. It's the same thing in terms of team, right? Yeah. I meet a lot of people who say, well, I'm not happy in the corporate world, I'd like to get out, and then once you start to have a conversation with them, then you realize they're not really made for the startup world, right? Yeah. Because you really need to shift your mindset, right? You need to move from I'm getting everything organized and I just coordinate to I need to get everything done myself, right? And that really needs a completely different mindset. So making sure you have the people with that mindset, and at the same time the skill set, that's my biggest focus at the moment.
I think it's so important, isn't it, that you're completely right. There are some people there who are brilliant entrepreneurs who've come from corporate backgrounds, and there's people there who need that institutional area to do it. And so it's not always obvious. It's not always obvious where they want, and people think they want something and then they deal with it. And it's been a big part of the last 25 years for me is working out, right, who is someone who is institutionalized and can do that, and who are people who can take the leap. So I think it's a fascinating plan. I absolutely agree with it. So let's finish by going back to PANTA and looking at what you're doing there. So a lot of excitement about where you're going. You're talking about first clients, MVPs, all that sort of stuff. What's it look like for you? What's the journey look like? What's exciting for the next year or so for the business?
All of it. So I
thought you might go there.
I wouldn't do it a second time. I mean, a lot of people ask me, why are you doing it again, right? And I'm saying, well, because I enjoy every part of it, right? I mean, look, there's a lot of parts which you go through as an entrepreneur. I don't need to tell you that, which you don't want to do, which you're not comfortable with, and which you've never done before. But the whole package really, really excites me. And we have this tremendous opportunity in front of us to disrupt an industry which is absolutely ripe for disruption. I get a lot of motivation by a lot of people in that part of the industry saying, nah, it's not going to work, like they did the last time. But proving the naysayers in the industry wrong is the exciting part.
I absolutely love, and you're so right on that, isn't it? It's one of those big sort of motivating factors there where you can come back in and show people what you're doing and how it works and how you can change something. Exactly. I love that, and I love the motivation behind it. So if people want to come in there and find out a little bit more, reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
PantaIndex.com or ping me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Listen, it's always a pleasure. Really good to see you. Thanks for coming in and sharing the story, and I can't wait to see how it all develops. If it's as quick as what happened last time, we'll be having to change the narrative of the notes for this afterwards straight away as well. So
I keep you posted.
It's been great having you on the show. And thanks for coming on. We'll see you on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.